So the question everyone wants to know, where are we headed in 2025? I'm Colin Krieg with RE/MAX Kelowna. We're going to take a look at the data together and see if we can forecast where we're headed. The first question is, what are the different kinds of markets and what are we in right now? Well, first we have a buyer's market, and that's when we have less than 15% of the listings selling. That point, there's downward pressure on prices. It's good for buyers. They typically have lots of selection. A balanced market is when we're at between 15 to 25%. That's a very healthy place to be. And the seller's market is when there's more than 25% of the available listings selling in a month. That's good for sellers. There's upward pressure on prices, they have less competition, and there's buyers that start fighting over listings. So right now, we're seeing about 11% of the listings selling for single-family homes and for townhomes. Condos are at about 12%. We have been firmly in a buyer's market for the last 18 to 24 months. So let's look at this on a longer time horizon. How about the last 20 years? And you can see how the market has ebbed and flowed. This is our best indicator of what kind of market we're in. I can paint in here the 20-year average for some context. Now, this peak way up here, this was the peak of COVID. We saw 99.8% of the listings selling. That was astronomical. That meant if there were no new listings, every single home in Kelowna would have sold that month. It was bonkers. This was our all-time record. Before that, in 2016, we hit 49%. That we thought was crazy. Well, we blew that out of the water. But look at how much time we spent under this average and under this 15% threshold there that puts us in a buyer's market. This was in 2008. You can see there was actually a dip here in 2018, 2019 before the COVID boom. And this is where we've sat for the last 2 years, pretty firmly in buyer's market territory. Okay, well, let's look at our listings. How is our inventory looking? And this here follows a pretty typical path. Let's overlay the 10-year average and you can see just how much excess inventory we really have. Look at this, how much more there is over our 10-year average. We typically have about 50% more than average right now throughout the year. And that's what has been putting a big damper on our market. If we look at this over a longer time horizon, this is the last 10 years. There's our 10-year average laid over top. You can see this was the heat of our COVID boom where there was nothing to choose from. It was slim pickings and everybody was fighting over everything. And here we are right now with an average of about 1,400 listings. But let's look even further and get a better perspective. This is a 20-year time horizon now. And now our 20-year average is way up here. This doesn't look so bad. And when we compare it to what we saw in 2008 through 2013, well, wow, listings were even higher than they are now. Again, this is yearly averages. I think we peaked at about 1,950 listings in 2008, 2009 time. So we still have a long ways to go before we get to somewhere like that. That's positive. How about sales? Well, here are the sales for the year. And if I add our 10-year average, you can see the big discrepancy here on how low our sales really were. But this is interesting. Look at October. And look at December, and look at how close they got to our 10-year average. This was unexpected. And look at how October boomed from September. That is highly unusual. So that is really positive to see 2024 end on such a great note where we see this influx of sales where I wouldn't have expected that based on the trajectory of how the year was going. That's excellent. Let's look at this on a longer time horizon. How about 45 years? This is from 1981 forward. And if I add in our average sales over that time, you can see clearly the ebbs and flows. So here in the 90s, we had a 7-year slump. And then after 2008, we had a 5-year slump. Right now, we're only 2 years into this. So if this between 7 and 5, the average is 6, are we done yet? I'm not so sure. Let's keep going. How about interest rates? So this is the forecast for the Bank of Canada overnight rate. It is clearly on a downward trajectory. Now, this is the Bank of Canada overnight rate. This doesn't impact fixed rates. This only impacts variable rates. Fixed rates is a whole nother conversation that's dictated by the bond market. Regardless, you can also see the spread of forecasts here. Look at this. Scotia thinks we're going to 3%. RBC thinks we're going to 2%. That is a massive spread. And every time Bank of Canada lowers rates, it has a positive impact from the media, from sentiment, and it builds confidence in the market, even though it doesn't directly impact fixed rates, which is what most people do. Okay, back to our sales numbers. So this is back to 1990. We've seen this already, but then I wanted to look at our vacancy rate. Now, the vacancy rate is tied to our rental market, not our sales market, but bear with me. Look at this. When I overlay this, look at how they're inversely correlated. When vacancy rate is low, sales are high. When vacancy rate is high, sales are low. And they work in almost perfect tandem. Look at this. Right? How interesting. So here in the other thing that was interesting is I noticed that once we get over that 1.5% vacancy rate number, that seems to be the magic number where we start to see sales come down and vacancy rate continues to climb. So here we saw our 7-year slump in the 90s. We know about that. We saw our 5-year after 2008. We know about that. And here is that 2018, 2019 that kind of just snuck through, but you can see vacancy rates were climbing, sales were on their way down, and here's what happened. COVID rescued us, sales skyrocketed, vacancy rate came down. But then look at what we have here. Our vacancy rate is climbing, and quickly. We went from just over 1% to 3.8%, what feels like overnight. This is interesting. So let's keep looking. The next thing I did is I said, okay, well, where are we headed? If that's what's happened, are we about to have our vacancy rate turn all the way around, or is it going to get worse? Let's look at our construction starts. And you can see here in 2017, we had a big boom of construction. And now we have a big boom of construction again. But what else caught my eye is how steep this 2017 line is compared to this more gradual line. We've been incrementally starting more and more projects over the last couple of years, where in 2017, this was just kind of a one-time boom, big ups and big construction boom. So how about units under construction? And here we can see in 2018 what came after our 2017 start. But look at 2024. Like, these projects take 2 and 3 years, right? And so they add up over time. We have 3,200 rentals under construction right now. For some context, we have about 9,000 available in Kelowna. So to have another third of that, another 3,200 under construction. Now, this is rental only under construction. This isn't the Bertram downtown and Water Street by the Park and Movala and Caban and Aqua and all of these projects that are available for sale that investors bought, that they were hoping they're either going to sell them and assign them or flip them and make good money, or if not, well, then I can carry it because interest rates are only 2% and vacancy rate is only 1%. If not, I can rent it for good money. That's not really happening, and that all comes on top of this. So what makes me nervous about this is if our vacancy rate continues to climb, then that's going to put downward pressure on rents, and rents are going to continue to fall. They've already started to fall. They're going to continue to fall. And if you could rent a nice 2-bedroom condo for $1,800 or $2,000 or whatever it is, then why would you buy your first property? And if we lose our first-time home buyers, this is going to be a big problem because there's a big trickle-up effect that they create. They buy the entry-level condo. That person buys a townhouse, and that person buys a house, and on it goes. So if we lose our first-time home buyers, this is going to have a massive impact to our market. Let's talk about pricing. So our benchmark price is a better indicator than the average price because it looks at the typical price of a home in Kelowna. So this is over the last 12 months. It looks pretty volatile, but it's quite zoomed in here. Between these two red lines is about a $40,000 spread. So it clearly hugged that $1 million mark. Even though we've been in a depressed market, we've been in a buyer's market, seen between 9 and 11% of the listings selling all year, prices have held relatively stable in that sort of average price point. Now, if we start looking at the $2 million plus or the luxury market, different ballgame. Either way, we're generally speaking here. Let's look at this on a longer timeline. This is from 2020 looking forward. So here we were pre-pandemic boom. This was the peak of it at just shy of 1.2 million. And here's our $1 million threshold. We saw a little bump there in 2023. And this is where we've sat for basically the last 18 months. So where are we headed? Well, sales tell us, hey, there might be something coming here. We could have a strong spring. That would be fantastic. If we could end up in a balanced market, that would be wonderful. Again, a really healthy place to be. But if all of a sudden we see more inventory coming on, or we see our vacancy rate continue to skyrocket and rents stay low, and we lose our first-time home buyers, we could be in for a slow market for the next several years. Based on history, it should be about another 4 years or 3 years at least of this to end up in our historical averages. If you have any questions or would like to talk about this further, give me a call anytime. I'm Colin Krieg from RE/MAX Kelowna.